All right, next ball game, Saturday action. I'm talking about Air Force at Army, 11:30 a.m. Saturday. Air Force is minus 6.5 on the road, totals 38. Now, the Falcons will have the better defense on the field on Saturday. They're allowing just 16 points a game, and they're in the top 10 in fewest total yards allowed. Trey Taylor and T.D. Blackman, they've got nearly 100 tackles between the both of them. When it comes to offensive production, the Falcons are running for more yards a game than any other program in college football. Now, they're facing an Army defense who has a tough time slowing down the run themselves. As a matter of fact, these guys are in the bottom 10 in the country in rush defense. They're also allowing just about 30 points a game. When it comes to the total, Army went 5-2 to the over in their last 7. Meanwhile, Air Force saw overs versus the likes of Utah State, Nevada, and Colorado. I'm going to lean toward Air Force minus 6.5, over 38. Next game, little Big Ten action. I'm talking about Ohio State at Northwestern, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Ohio State's minus 37, total 61. Now, the undefeated Buckeyes did go 5-1 against the spread in their last 6. They're also scoring 49 points a game, and they're racking up over 500 total yards a game. C.J. Stroud's leading the nation in touchdown passes and QBR. Meanwhile, wideouts Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison, they have nearly 100 yards receiving apiece. And when it comes to defensive play, well, the Buckeyes are in the top 10 in fewest total yards allowed. They're facing a Northwestern squad who scores only 17 points a game themselves, and they have one of the worst rushing attacks in the Big Ten. When it comes to defensive play, well, these guys are allowing nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. When it comes to the total, the Wildcats saw their last 3 straight all get over the line. Meanwhile, the Buckeyes saw their last 6 straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Ohio State minus 37, over 61. Next ball game, little Big 12 action. I'm talking about Texas Tech at TCU, 12 o'clock East. TCU's minus 9, total 71. Now, the Horned Frogs have been unstoppable on offense. They're scoring over 44 points a game, and they're in the top 5 in total yards. Kendre Miller's gaining over 100 yards a game on the ground, and he scored 11 rushing touchdowns. Now, they're facing a Texas Tech squad who lost 3 out of their last 4, and they allowed a whole bunch of points in those losses. Matter of fact, the Red Raiders allowed 41 points a game on average in those 3 losses I just mentioned. When it comes to the total, wouldn't be surprised if this one got over the number. Texas Tech is 6-2 to the over for the entire year. Meanwhile, TCU saw 6 out of their last 8 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward TCU minus 9, over 71. Next ball game, little ACC action. I'm talking about UNC at Virginia, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Now, UNC's minus 10 on the road, totals 59. And as bad as this Tar Heel defense is, well, their offense is certainly built for a track meet. So, as bad as their D is, their O can bail them out and score a lot of points. They're actually averaging 42 points per contest, and they're in the top 10 in the country in passing. Now, Drake May's throwing for 334 yards per contest, and he's tied for the lead in the country with 29 touchdown passes. And for those who don't know, North Carolina lost just 1 game thus far in the year, and they've gotten victories over the likes of Pitt, Miami, Florida, and Appalachian State. Now, they're facing a sputtering Virginia program who lost 4 out of their last 5 themselves, and they simply can't score points to save their lives. The Cavaliers are averaging only 16 points a game. They obviously have a tough time moving the chains. Now, total-wise, I do think this one does actually have the possibility of getting over. Obviously, with UNC in the game, any game can go over. But the Cavaliers of Virginia, they did see 2 out of their last 4 get over the total. Overs against the likes of Louisville and Duke. Meanwhile, North Carolina, they've gone 5-3 to the over in their last 8. No real surprise there. I'm going to lean toward North Carolina minus 10, over 59. Next ball game, it is going to be Tulane at Tulsa, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Now, Tulane is -7, totals 58. And this Tulane defense, they've been super tough this year. They're allowing only 17 points a game, and they're in the top 20 in pass defense. Dorian Williams leads the program with 58 tackles, along with a couple of sacks. Now, they're facing a Tulsa squad who allows just way too many points. They're giving up 34 points a game, and they have one of the worst rush defenses in the country. As a matter of fact, they're in the bottom 10 in stopping the run. When it comes to the total, Tulsa's gone 5-3 to the over this year. Meanwhile, Tulane saw their last two straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Tulane, -7, over 58. Next matchup, Kentucky at Missouri, 12 o'clock East. The Kentucky Wildcats are -2, totals 43.5. And even though the Wildcats are favored, they did lose 3 out of their last 4. And they averaged only 13 points per contest in those losses. Now, Kentucky's also had a tough time moving the football. They're 106th in the nation in rushing yards per game. They're facing a tough Missouri defense who doesn't let anyone move the ball against them. They're actually in the top 20 in the country in fewest yards allowed per game. Tyron Hopper and Jalen Carleys, they have 90 total tackles between the both of them. When it comes to the scoring, Missouri saw their last 7 straight all-state under the line. Meanwhile, Kentucky's 6-1 to the under in their last 7 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Missouri, +2, under 43.5. Next ballgame, little SEC action. I'm talking about Florida at Texas A&M. 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Now, the Texas A&M Aggies are -2.5 at home, totals 54. And even though A&M's favored by 2.5, they were ice cold in the month of October. As a matter of fact, the Aggies went 0-4 in October, and they now find themselves as one of the worst rushing teams in college football. Meanwhile, in defense, they're allowing over 205 yards a game on the ground. They're taking on a Florida team who certainly loves to ground and pound it. The Gators are averaging just about 200 yards a game on the ground. When it comes to the total, Florida's last 2 straight did get over the number. Meanwhile, the Aggies went 3-1 to the over in their last 4. I'm going to lean toward the University of Florida, +2.5, over 54. Next matchup, little Big Ten action. I'm talking about Minnesota at Nebraska, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Minnesota's -16, totals 47. Now, I do actually think Minnesota should be able to cover this number here. For one, they have one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. They're allowing just 14 points a game, and they're actually in the top 10 in the entire nation in fewest yards allowed per contest. Meanwhile, offensively, well, not many teams can run it better than the Gophers. Mo Ibrahim's running for nearly $120 a game, and he scored 13 times already on the ground. Now, they're facing a Nebraska defense who's one of the worst in the nation in stopping the run themselves. And as a matter of fact, the Huskers rank 121st in total yards allowed per game. Now, when it comes to the number, Nebraska did see overs against the likes of Purdue, Georgia Southern, and Northwestern. Meanwhile, Minnesota's 4-3 to the over this year themselves. I'm going to lean toward Minnesota, -16, over 47. Next matchup, it is going to be Iowa at Purdue, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Purdue is -5, totals 42.5. Now, Purdue's had little issue throwing it all over the yard this season. They're in the top 15 in passing yards. And of course, wide receiver Charlie Jones, he's averaging well over 100 yards a game. They're also going up against one of the worst offenses in college football. I was currently in the bottom 3 in total yards per game. And no real surprise here, guys. The Hawkeyes are currently in the bottom 10 in scoring. And when it comes to the number, 5 out of Iowa's last 8 did stay under the total. No real surprise there. Meanwhile, Purdue saw unders against the likes of Minnesota and Florida Atlantic. I'm going to lean toward Purdue, -5, under 42.5. Next matchup, it is going to be Maryland at Wisconsin, 12 o'clock East. Wisconsin's minus 5.5, totals 52. Now, the Badgers have played some real tough defense this year despite their record. These guys allow only 21 points a game, and they're in the top 35 in fewest yards allowed. Maema Jongmeta leads the team in tackles with 54 of them. Meanwhile, safety John Torchio has a college football best 5 interceptions. Now, they're facing a Maryland defense who has a tough time slowing down the pass themselves. The Terps are currently 103rd in pass defense. When it comes to covering the point spread, Maryland failed to cover in their last 3 straight. Now, total-wise, the Terrapins did see those 3 games I just mentioned all get over the number. Meanwhile, Wisconsin went 6-0 to the over in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Wisconsin minus 5.5, over 52. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Western Kentucky at Charlotte, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Western Kentucky's minus 16.5, total 72. And not only are the Hilltoppers averaging 35 points a game, they're also one of the best passing teams in the nation. Austin Reed's second in the country in passing yards with over 2,700. He's going up against a Charlotte team who arguably has the worst defense in college football. The 49ers are allowing more points per contest than any other team in Division I. When it comes to the total, Charlotte went 6-2 to the over in their last 8. Meanwhile, Western Kentucky saw overs against the likes of Troy, Florida International, and Indiana. I'm going to lean toward Western Kentucky minus 16.5, over 72. Next ball game, it is going to be Georgia Tech at Virginia Tech, 12:30 Eastern kickoff. Va Tech is minus 3, totals 42. Now, the Hokies did cover in their last 2 straight, and they played some pretty tough defense in those covers. Dax Hollifield leads the defense with 59 tackles on the year. He also has 4 PDs and a couple of fumble recoveries. Meanwhile, Chamari Connor is right behind him with 52 tackles on the year. They're facing a Georgia Tech team who lost 4 out of their last 6, and they averaged just 8 points a game offensively in those losses. As a matter of fact, the Yellow Jackets are in the bottom 5 in the country in scoring on average per contest. Now, total-wise, the Ramblin' Wreck, they're 6-2 to the under for the year. Meanwhile, Virginia Tech saw 6 out of their last 8 stay under the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Virginia Tech minus 3, under 42. Next ball game, it is going to be South Florida taking on Temple, 2 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Now, the South Florida Bulls are minus 3.5, totals 52. And even though the Bulls are favored on the road here, they played some piss-poor defense this season. They're allowing over 38 points a game, and they're in the bottom 5 in total yards allowed. When it comes to offensive production, well, USF, they're currently throwing for only 192 yards a game. They're facing a Temple defense who does a real nice job stopping the pass. As a matter of fact, the Owls have a top 5 pass defense in the country. Leighton Jordan and Darian Varner have combined for 13 sacks between the two of them. When it comes to the total, the Owls saw unders in 4 out of their last 6. Meanwhile, USF saw unders against the likes of Cincinnati and Louisville. I'm going to lean toward Temple plus 3.5, under 52. Next ball game, it is going to be Marshall at Old Dominion, 2 o'clock Eastern start time. Now, Marshall is minus 3, totals 46.5. Now, Marshall should be able to get the job done in this spot here. They have one of the best defenses in the country right now. Owen Porter's 9th in the nation with 9 sacks. Meanwhile, Micah Abraham and Stephen Gilmore, they have 7 picks between the two of them. Now, they're going up against an ODU offense who's 94th in the country in total yards per game. When it comes to covering the point spread, the Monarchs failed to cover in 4 out of their last 5. Now, total-wise, ODU's 4-2 to the under in their last 6 ball games. Meanwhile, Marshall saw all of their games except for one stay under the line. I'm going to lean toward Marshall -3, under 46.5. Next contest, it is going to be Baylor at Oklahoma, 3 o'clock Eastern start time. The Oklahoma Sooners are -4, totals 57.5. Now, Oklahoma's had a tough time on defense this season. They're allowing over 435 yards of total offense per contest. They're also facing a Baylor team who's averaging nearly 39 points per contest themselves. Running back Richard Reese, he's averaging just about 100 yards a game rushing, and he scored 12 times on the ground. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Baylor has a top 25 rush defense. Now, total-wise, Baylor saw their last 5 straight get over the number. Meanwhile, OU saw overs recently against the likes of Kansas, TCU, and K-State. I'm going to lean toward Baylor +4, over 57.5. Next matchup, it is going to be Georgia State at Southern Miss, 3 o'clock East. The Southern Miss Golden Eagles are -2, totals 50. Now, the Eagles are on a 3-game winning streak. They posted a record of 5-1 straight up in their last 6. They've also done a real nice job defending the run. Dom Kiwan is 3rd in the country in sacks with 75 of them. Meanwhile, Malik Shorts, he's the team leader with 64 tackles, along with a trio of interceptions. Now, they're facing a Georgia State offense who's been a little threat throwing the football this year. They actually rank 111th in the country in passing. Meanwhile, defensively, on the other side of the ball, the Panthers have been, well, pretty bad. They're allowing over 32 points per contest. They currently rank 105th in the nation in total yards allowed. Now, scoring-wise, 3 out of Georgia State's last 4 did stay under the number. Meanwhile, Southern Miss went 3 under the under in their last 4 as well. I'm going to lean towards Southern Miss -2, under 50. All right, next ball game I have for you. It is going to be, we're going a little fast here. I'm getting a little ahead in my notes. But anyway, next game, it is going to be Middle Tennessee taking on Louisiana Tech, 3 o'clock East. Now, Middle Tennessee State is -3 away from home, total 63. Now, the Blue Raiders of Middle Tennessee, they may get exposed pretty bad on defense here. They're in the bottom 20 in defending the pass. They're also allowing over 400 yards a game of total offense. They're facing a LATECH team who loves to air it out. They're in the top 25 in the country in pass yards per game. Trey Harris and Smoke Harris, they've combined for over 1,100 yards between the two of them. When it comes to the total, the Bulldogs saw all of their games this year get over the total except for one. Meanwhile, Middle Tennessee, they're 4-2 to the over in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Louisiana Tech +3, over 63. Let me get ready for this one. Next ball game. Game of the year, at least for now. Game of the year through week 10. I'm talking about Tennessee taking on Georgia, 3:30 p.m. East. Now, the Georgia Bulldogs are -8.5, total 65. And the Bulldogs should be able to take care of business here. They're gaining over 530 total yards per game. Stetson Bennett's actually 10th in the nation right now in total QBR. But it's actually going to be this Bulldog defense, which is the X factor. These guys are giving up only 10 points a game, and they rank in the top 5 in fewest yards allowed. Now they're facing a Volunteer squad who has one of the worst pass defenses in the country. These guys are currently in the bottom 5 in Division I in stopping the pass. When it comes to the total, the Vols saw unders against the likes of Kentucky, LSU, and Pitt. Meanwhile, Georgia's 6-2 to the under this year themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Georgia Bulldogs, -8.5, under 65. Next matchup, Oregon taking on Colorado, 3:30 p.m. East. The Oregon Ducks are -31, total 62. Now, the Ducks should be able to cover this number here. The Buffs, on the other side, they're allowing more yards a game on the ground than any other team in college football. And even if Colorado did play good defense, well, the Ducks are going to be tough to stop with the ball in their hands. These guys are just really good offensively. They're scoring over 42 points a game, and they actually rank in the top 3 in total yards. Bo Nix currently ranks 6th in the NCAA in QBR. Meanwhile, defensively, the Ducks are in the they actually rank 15th in the nation in stopping the run. They're facing a Colorado team who has a tough time moving the chains. Not only are they averaging just 16 points per contest, they're also in the bottom 10 in total yards per game. Now, Colorado went 6-1 to the over in their last 7. No real surprise, there with their bad defense. Meanwhile, the Ducks saw 6 out of their last 7 get over the number themselves. No real surprise there with their good offense. I'm going to lean toward Oregon minus 31 over 62. All right, next ball game, the Brawlers. I'm talking about Michigan State taking on Illinois, 3:30 p.m. East. Illinois minus 17, totals 43. Now, the Illini should be able to cover this number here. They statistically have the best defense in all of the country right now. They're currently allowing fewer points per contest than any other team in the nation. And, of course, they're also giving up fewer total yards per game than any other program in the country as well. Now, the combination of Jerzon Newton, Gabe Jacas, and Keith Randolph, all those guys, they've combined for 13 total sacks between all 3 of them. When it comes to offensive production, well, these guys are running for just about 200 yards a game on the ground. Now, they're facing a Michigan State team who really can't stop anybody. They're actually 108th in the country in total yards allowed. Meanwhile, offensively, these guys are in the bottom 15 in rushing yards. When it comes to the total, 2 out of Sparty's last 3 did get over the number. Meanwhile, Illinois saw overs recently with the likes of Minnesota and Wisconsin. I'm going to lean toward Illinois minus 17 over 43. Next ball game, Penn State, Indiana, 3:30 East. Penn State's the 13-point favorite on the road, totals 54. Now, the Nittany Lions should be able to cover here on the road. They're actually scoring over 33 points a game, and they did cover in their last 2 straight. They're also facing an Indiana defense who's 100th in the country in total yards allowed. Nick Singleton's gaining over 6 yards a carry and scored 7 times on the ground for the Nittany Lions. Now, the Hoosiers on the other side, they're on a 5-game losing streak, and they have one of the worst offenses in the Big Ten. They're 106th in the country in total yards per game. When it comes to the scoring, 4 out of the Hoosiers' last 7 did get over the total. Meanwhile, Penn State saw their last 3 straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Penn State minus 13 over 54. Next matchup back in the Big 12. I'm talking about Oklahoma State taking on Kansas. 3:30 Eastern start time. Oklahoma State's minus 2.5 on the road, total 66. Now, the Cowboys may end up torching this Kansas defense. The Jayhawks are one of the worst in the country in stopping the pass. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State's throwing for nearly 300 yards a game. Spencer Sanders has thrown for just about 2,200 yards, along with 15 touchdowns. Now, they're taking on a Kansas team who's on a three-game skid themselves. And once again, they rank in the bottom 15 in stopping the pass. Now, when it comes to the total, the Jayhawks are 5-3 to the over on the year. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State's 5-1 to the over in their last 6 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Oklahoma State minus 2.5 over 66. Man, this is a long podcast. My butt hurts. It's falling asleep. Anyway, next game, ACC, Syracuse at Pitt, 3:30 East. Pitt's minus 4, totals 50.5. And even though the Panthers are favored by 4, Pitt did take the loss in 3 out of their last 4 ball games. They've also been one of the worst ATS teams in the country. They're just 2-6 against the spread on the year. Meanwhile, defensively, they're allowing 28 points a game. They're facing a Syracuse team who's been quite the opposite. They're 6-2 against the spread themselves, and they've done a nice job shutting down the pass. Now, in addition to giving up just 18 points per contest, The Orange currently ranks in the top 5 in passing defense. Michael Jones leads the D with 68 tackles, along with 3 sacks. When it comes to the total, Syracuse is 4-1 of the under in their last 5. Meanwhile, Pitt saw unders recently against the likes of Louisville and Tennessee. I'm going to lean towards Syracuse, +4, keeping this one close, under 50.5. All right, guys, I'm going to have to take a break. Be back in a couple minutes. Oh, went the wrong way. I gotta tell you, that's like entirely too much sitting in one spot. I mean, or just get a more comfortable chair, I guess. I don't know. That's just terrible just sitting there like that. But anyway, where did we leave off? Syracuse, that's right. Okay, let's go ahead and move on here, guys. Thanks for sticking with me. But anyway, next game, UCF taking on Memphis, 3:30 p.m. East. UCF's -3.5, total 60. Now, the Knights have been really dominant on offense. They're in the top 5 in total yards per game, and they've been unstoppable running the football. Meanwhile, defensively, the Knights are allowing only 17 points per contest. Jason Johnson's leading the D with 72 tackles on the season. Now, they're playing a Memphis team who's on a 3-game skid, and they have a terrible secondary. These guys are 122nd in pass defense. When it comes to the total, Memphis saw all of their games get over the number except for one. Meanwhile, UCF saw overs against the likes of Temple and South Carolina. I'm going to lean toward UCF -3.5, over 60. Next ball game, it is going to be Wazoo at Stanford, 3:30 p.m. East. Washington State's -5, totals 49.5. And as bad as Stanford is, well, the one thing they do right is defend the pass. They also got the outright W in 2 out of their last 3. They're facing a Wazoo team who does little to establish the run. As a matter of fact, these guys are in the bottom 10 in rush yards per game. Now, defensively for Stanford, Lamani Damouni and Kendall Williamson, they've combined for over 100 tackles. When it comes to the total, both schools saw their last 3 straight outings all fall under the line respectively. I'm going to lean towards Stanford +5, under 49.5. Next ball game, it is going to be West Virginia at Iowa State, 3:30 p.m. East. Iowa State's -6, totals 51. And even though Iowa State's playing some really tough defense, they're on a 5-game losing streak, and they average just 13 points a game offensively in their last 4. Now they're facing a West Virginia squad who can certainly move the sticks. These guys are scoring just about 35 points a game. And they covered against the likes of Baylor, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. When it comes to the total, the Mountaineers saw 3 out of their last 5 stay under the line. Meanwhile, Iowa State went 4-0 to the under in the month of October. I'm going to lean toward West Virginia +6, under 51. Next ball game, New Mexico taking on Utah State, 3:30 Eastern start time. Utah State's -16, totals 44. Now, I'm not sure the Aggies are crisp enough on offense to cover this big number. They're 113th in the country in passing. Meanwhile, defensively, they're allowing 205 yards a game on the ground. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't win, but man, with those type of figures in mind, wow, 16 points, that's a lot of points to lay. Anyway, they're facing a New Mexico squad who, in my opinion, has the better defense on the field. Cody Moon and A.J. Halsey they both have 120 tackles between the both of them. Meanwhile, as a team, the Lobos have covered against the likes of UNLV, UTEP, and Boise. Now, total-wise, 3 out of the Lobos' last 6 did stay under the number. Meanwhile, Utah State went 6-2 to the under for the entire year. I'm going to lean toward New Mexico, +16, under 44. Next ball game, it is going to be UTSA, Texas San Antonio, taking on UAB, 3:30 Eastern start time. Now, UTSA's -1.5 on the road, totals 52. And even though Texas San Antonio is favored, I'm not sure their D is good enough to get the W here. They're 104th in the nation in total yards allowed. They're also facing a UAB squad who's one of the best running teams in the country. They're gaining just about 250 yards a game on the ground. Dwayne McBride, he's rushed for over 1,100 yards already, and he scored a dozen times on the ground. When it comes to defensive play, the Blazers have a top 10 passing defense. Now, total-wise, UAB did see overs against the likes of Middle Tennessee and Rice. Meanwhile, UTSA saw overs in 5 out of their last 8. I'm going to lean toward UAB +1.5, over 52. Next contest, Liberty, Arkansas, 4 o'clock East. The Arkansas Razorbacks are -14, total 64.5. Now, the Razorbacks have been terrible in pass defense. They're actually in the bottom 3 in the country in passing yards allowed per game. When it comes to the point spread, they failed to cover in 4 out of their last 6. They're facing a red-hot Liberty squad who won their last 5 straight. They took the loss only once this year. Now, the Flames have done a terrific job running the football. They're gaining nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. Meanwhile, defensively, on the other side of the ball, they're currently in the top 30 in fewest yards allowed per game. Robert Rahimi, he leads the secondary with 4 picks on the season. Meanwhile, teammate Mike Smith Jr., he has a team best 52 tackles. When it comes to the total, Liberty did see overs against the likes of UMass, Old Dominion, and Wake Forest. Meanwhile, all of Arkansas's contests got over the line except for one. I'm going to lean toward Liberty +14, over 64.5. The next ball game, it is going to be Navy at Cincinnati, 4 o'clock Eastern start time. Cincinnati's the 20-point favorite, totals 47. And I'll tell you this much, for a team laying 20 points, the Bearcats have certainly been terrible against the number. They failed to cover in their last 4 straight, and they're also facing a Navy team who grounds and pounds all day long. These guys are in the top 10 in the country in rush yards per game. Rarely passes the ball, just run. Now, defensively, this physical midshipman D, they're very good against the run themselves. When it comes to the total, Navy saw unders against the likes of Air Force, East Carolina, and Delaware. Meanwhile, Cincinnati saw their last 4 straight stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Navy plus 20, under 47. Next game, South Alabama, Georgia Southern, 4 o'clock Eastern kickoff. South Alabama's -3 away from home, total 60 and a hook. Now, SALA should, really be, South Alabama, I call them SALA. SALA should really be able to expose this Georgia Southern defense. The Eagles are in the bottom 5 in the entire country in total yards allowed. They're also facing a SALA offense who does a nice job of airing it out. The Jags are in the top 35 in passing yards per game, but even more impressive has been this South Alabama Jaguar defense. These guys allow only 17 points a game, and they're in the top 5 in stopping the run. James Miller and Jaden Voisin, they have nearly 90 tackles between the two of them. Meanwhile, as a team, the Jags got the W in 6 out of their last 8. Now, total-wise, SALA saw overs against the likes of UL Monroe, UCLA, and Central Michigan. Meanwhile, Georgia Southern saw 2 out of their last 3 get over the number themselves. I'm going to lean towards South Alabama, -3, over 60.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Florida International taking on North Texas, 4 o'clock Eastern start time. North Texas is -21, total 62. Now, the Mean Green, they really don't play good enough defense to cover 3 scores. They're allowing over 32 points a game, and they rank in the bottom 10 in total yards allowed. Now, they're facing an FIU team who's on a 2-game winning streak themselves, and they did a pretty nice job covering the spread here recently. These guys are 4-1 against the spread in their last 5. Covers against the likes of Louisiana Tech, Charlotte, and Texas San Antonio. Gathan Bernadels, this team's leading tackler, with 71. When it comes to the total, the Panthers saw overs against the likes of Louisiana Tech, Western Kentucky, and Bryant University. Meanwhile, North Texas saw 5 out of their last 7 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward FIU plus 21, keeping this one close, over 62. Next game, Troy at Louisiana, 5 o'clock East. Troy's the 5.5-point favorite, totals 43 and a hook. Now, Troy's been red hot since their opener against Ole Miss. The Trojans are 6-1 straight up in their last 7. And they failed to cover only twice during that stretch. Now, Troy's also played some exceptionally tough defense. They're allowing just 17 points a game, and they rank in the top 25 in fewest yards allowed. TJ Jackson's got a team-best 6.5 sacks. Meanwhile, Carlton Marshall leads the squad in tackles. Now they're facing a raging Cajun team who lost 4 out of their last 6 themselves. And they certainly struggled to score in those losses. And speaking of offensive woes, the Cajuns are 104th in the country in rush yards per game. Now, total-wise, Louisiana saw unders in 3 out of their last 5. Meanwhile, Troy went 4-1 to the under in their last 5 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Troy -5.5, under 43 and a hook. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Texas State at UL Monroe, 5 o'clock Eastern start time. UL Monroe's -1, totals 51. Now, the Warhawks have lost their last 4 straight, and they have only 2 wins all year. These guys have been a product of some really bad defense. They're allowing 38 points a game, and they rank 110th in total yards allowed. Now, they're facing a Texas State team who plays some pretty sharp defense themselves. They've actually held their opponents to 24 points or less in their last 3 straight. Cordell Rogers, he leads the secondary with 4 interceptions from that defensive back position. Meanwhile, teammate London Harris, he's the team leader in tackles. When it comes to total, 5 out of the Bobcats' last 7 stayed under the number. Meanwhile, UL Monroe saw unders versus the likes of Coastal Carolina, Louisiana, and Nicholls State. I'm going to lean toward Texas State +1, under 51. Next contest should be a good one. It normally is. I'm talking about Alabama at LSU, 7 o'clock East. The Alabama Crimson Tide's -12, totals 58. And even though this is a big number on the road in a conference game, let alone a rivalry game, Bama's scoring over 43 points a game. I really don't have many concerns with their offense. And of course, defensively on the other side of the ball, the Tide's allowing just 295 total yards per game. Will Anderson's the team leader in sacks. He also has a pick 6. Meanwhile, Henry To'o leads this defensive unit in tackles. Now they're facing an LSU squad who failed to cover against the likes of Tennessee, Auburn, and Florida State. When it comes to defensive performance, the Tigers are allowing nearly 150 yards a game on the ground. Now, total-wise, LSU's 4-2 to the under in their last 6. Meanwhile, Bama's 5-3 to the under on the year. I'm going to lean toward Alabama minus 12, under 58. Next contest, Texas at K-State, 7 o'clock East. The Texas Longhorns are minus 2, totals 54.5. And even though the Longhorns have a tough time slowing down the pass, it really doesn't matter because K-State doesn't pass the football. As a matter of fact, the Wildcats are in the bottom 20 in passing yards per game. They're facing a Texas defense who certainly does a solid job slowing down the run. They're also giving up just 21 points a game. Jalen Ford and DeMarvion Overshone, they have nearly 130 tackles together. When it comes to offensive production, the Longhorns are in the top 25 in points. Now, total-wise, Texas saw overs against the likes of Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and Texas San Antonio. Meanwhile, Kansas State saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line. I'm going to lean toward Texas minus 2, over 54.5. Next matchup, BYU taking on Boise State, 7 o'clock East. Boise State's minus 7.5, totals 55. And even though Brigham Young stinks this year, well, Boise's been literally no threat throwing the football. They're in the bottom 20 in passing yards per game. Meanwhile, for BYU, as bad as their defense has been, well, the only thing they do right on D is cover receivers. Ben Bywater, leads the club in tackles and has a couple of picks. When it comes to the total, the Cougs saw 3 out of their last 4 stay under the number. Meanwhile, Boise State saw unders against the likes of Air Force, UTEP, and Tennessee Martin. Give me the Soakers. Going to lean toward those soaking young men of the LDS Church. Give me BYU plus 7.5, under 55. Next ball game, UNLV, San Diego State, 7 o'clock East. The San Diego State Aztecs are minus 7, totals 49. Now, the Aztecs failed to cover in 5 out of their last 8. They're also throwing for just 137 yards a game. They actually rank in the bottom 10 in the nation in that category. No real surprise there. They're facing a UNLV squad whose strength is their secondary. Johnny Baldwin and Jure Williams, they lead the D-backs with 35 tackles apiece. When it comes to covering the point spread, the Rebels got the job done against the number in 5 out of their last 8. Now, total-wise, UNLV saw unders against the likes of Air Force, San Jose State, and Utah State. Meanwhile, San Diego State went 5-2 to the under in their last 7. I'm going to lean toward UNLV plus 7, under 49. Next matchup, Houston, SMU, 7 o'clock East. The SMU Mustangs are minus 2, total 67. Now, the high-powered Mustangs are scoring 36 points a game, and they're throwing it all over the yard. Wideout Rashee Rice, he's averaging over 120 yards a game receiving, and he scored 6 times. Now, this Mustang offense is also in the top 25 in total yards per game. They're facing a Houston squad who has a tough time slowing down the pass. Not only are they allowing 31 points a game, they're also 99th in pass defense. When it comes to the total, the Cougs saw all of their games this year get over the number except for 1. Meanwhile, 3 out of SMU's last 5 got over the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward SMU minus 2, over 67. All right, guys, I'm going to take my next and final break for the video. See you in a couple of minutes. Yo, what's up, y'all? Just took a break. Had a snack. Make sure it's out of my beard. You know, because that's the last thing I need is more snacks. All right, moving on. Big Ten action. Michigan, Rutgers, 7:30 East. Michigan's minus 25.5. Totals 45. Now, the Wolverines, they should destroy these guys. They're undefeated on the season, and they're allowing hardly any yards on defense. They're giving up just 11 points a game, and they're the top 3 in fewest yards allowed. Meanwhile, offensively, Blake Corum, well, he can hardly be contained. He's gained nearly 1,100 yards on the year, and he scored 14 times rushing. Now, they're facing a Rutgers team who can hardly move the ball themselves. They're throwing for only 155 yards a game, and they rank in the bottom 15 in total yards. That's certainly not going to get the job done in the Big Ten, especially playing teams like Michigan. Like, that's terrible. Anyway, total-wise, Rutgers' last 3 straight stayed under the number. Meanwhile, the Wolverines are 6-2 to the under this year themselves. I'm going to lean toward Michigan minus 25.5, under 45. Next game should be a good one. I'm talking about Clemson at Notre Dame, 7:30 p.m. East. Clemson's minus 3 away from home, totals 47.5. Now, the Tigers have the superior offense in this one. They're scoring over 37 points a game, and they've yet to lose a ball game this year. And most of that is thanks to this super tough defense. These guys are in the top 10 in fewest rush yards allowed. Trent Simpson and Jalen Phillips, they've combined for just about 100 tackles. They're facing a Notre Dame team who has a tough time passing the football themselves. These guys are 106th in the country in passing yards. Now, the Irish also suffered outright losses to the likes of Stanford, Marshall, and Ohio State. So they can lose to bad teams or good teams. And when it comes to the total, the Irish are 5-3 to the under this year. Meanwhile, Clemson saw unders against the likes of Syracuse, Boston College, and Georgia Tech. I'm going to lean toward the Clemson Tigers minus 3, under 47.5. Next matchup, it is going to be Arizona taking on Utah, 7:30 p.m. East. Utah is minus 18, total 68. And even though the Utes have been dominant, they've been pretty bad against the spread here lately. They failed to cover in their last 3 straight. They're also facing an Arizona team who can really sling it. These guys are in the top 3 in passing, and they're scoring over 32 points a game. Jake Dellar has thrown for over 2,600 yards this year, along with 22 touchdowns. When it comes to covering the point spread, the Wildcats got the job done in 4 out of their last 6. Now, total-wise, Arizona's 6-2 to the over this year. Meanwhile, Utah saw 5 out of their last 8 get over the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Arizona plus 18, over 68. Next ball game, little SEC action. Talking about Auburn taking on Mississippi State, 7:30 East. The Mississippi State Bulldogs are minus 13 at home, totals 52. And even though the Bulldogs do throw it all over the yard, this Auburn team on the other side, they do have a top 25 passing defense. So they do have the ability to slow down Mississippi State. Whether they do it or not, that's yet to be determined. But they're good enough to slow them down through the air. And if you're worried about the Auburn Tigers giving up yards on the ground, well, Mississippi State's averaging just 90 yards a game rushing. They literally don't run the ball. Now, when it comes to covering the spread, Mississippi State did fail to cover in 4 out of their last 6. Failures to cover against the likes of Bama, Kentucky, and LSU. Meanwhile, Auburn covered in 2 out of their last 4. Covers against the likes of Ole Miss and LSU. Auburn's last 3 straight did get over the number, by the way. Meanwhile, Mississippi State saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line. I'm going to lean toward Auburn plus 13, keeping this one close, even though they fired their coach, and the over 52. Next game, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, 7:30 East. South Carolina's minus 6.5, totals 49. This Gamecock defense should keep these guys in this game. They held their opponents to 24 points or less in their last 5 straight. They're also limiting their competition to just 196 yards a game through the air. Nick Emanwari's the defensive leader in tackles with 51 of them. Now they're facing a Vandy squad who's on a 4-game skid themselves, and they failed to cover in 5 out of their last 7. When it comes to defensive play, the Commodores allow 37 points a game, and they rank in the bottom 3 in slowing down the pass. Now, total-wise, Vandy saw 3 out of their last 4 stay under the number. Meanwhile, South Carolina saw unders against the likes of Missouri, Kentucky, and Georgia. Give me South Carolina minus 6.5, under 49. Next game, James Madison, Louisville, 7:30 p.m. East. Why are you still watching, by the way? We're an hour into this podcast. If you're still watching, God bless you. Anyway, James Madison, Louisville, 7:30 p.m. East. Louisville's minus 8, totals 54.5. Now, the Cards are on a 3-game winning streak, and they've done a nice job covering the point spread. Louisville's 5-2 against the spread in their last 7. They've done a nice job running the football. These guys are gaining nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. Meanwhile, defensively, the Cards are in the top 25 in fewest points allowed. Yaya Diaby and Yasir Abdullah have double-digit stacks between the two of them. That's sacks. Now, they're facing a James Madison team who lost their last 2 straight, and they gave up 71 total points during that span. Now, the Duke's secondary is also 79th in the nation in slowing down the pass. When it comes to the total, JMU's 5-1 of the over in their last 6. Meanwhile, Louisville saw 4 out of their last 6 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Louisville minus 8, over 54.5. Next contest, it is going to be FSU at Miami, 7:30 Eastern start time. Or is this a neutral site game? I don't care. I don't care where it's at because I'm leaning one way, and here it is. Anyway, Florida State, they're minus 7, totals 53, and this should be a very physical football game, and I don't like the Noles laying points away from home. They've already taken the loss in 3 out of their last 4 outings. They're also facing a Miami squad who can certainly take away Florida State's strengths because the Canes have been very tough stopping the run this year. They're in the top 25 in rush defense. Meanwhile, on the other side of the football, offensively, the Canes are actually in the top 20 in passing yards. Now, 5 out of the Canes' last 7 did stay under the line. Meanwhile, FSU saw unders against the likes of NC State, Wake Forest, and LSU. I'm going to lean toward Miami plus 7, keeping this one close, under 53. Next matchup, Wake Forest, NC State, 8 o'clock East. Wake Forest is minus 5, totals 54. Now, the Deacs are scoring nearly 40 points a game, and they're one of the better throwing teams in the country. Sam Hartman's 6th in the nation with 22 touchdown passes. Now, they're facing an NC State team who's had some troubles moving the football themselves. They're 100th in the nation in rushing yards. They also failed to cover the point spread in their last 5 straight. Now, when it comes to the total, Wake Forest saw 3 out of their last 4 stay under the number. Meanwhile, NC State saw unders against the likes of Syracuse, Florida State, and Texas Tech. I'm going to lean toward Wake Forest minus 5, under 54. Next contest, UCLA. UCLA at Arizona State, 9:30 p.m. East. UCLA is minus 10.5, total 63. The Bruins have had an easy time moving the sticks this year. They're in the top 10 in total yards, and they're averaging 40 points a game. Running back Zach Charbonnet is averaging over 120 yards a game on the ground, and he's scored double-digit touchdowns. Meanwhile, as a team, the Bruins have just 1 loss on the season. They're facing an Arizona State program who lost 5 out of their last 7, and they just give up way too many yards on defense. Now, total-wise, 3 out of ASU's last 4 did get over the line. Meanwhile, UCLA went 5-1 of the over in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward the UCLA Bruins, minus 10.5, over 63. Next ball game, it is going to be Cal at USC, 10:30 p.m. East. The USC Trojans are minus 22, totals 59.5. Now, I'm not sure the Trojans are playing good enough defense to beat the brakes off these guys. They're 93rd in the country in pass defense right now. They're also allowing over 400 total yards per game. Now they're facing a Cal team who does a decent job of throwing the football themselves. The Golden Bears also covered against Washington, Arizona, and Notre Dame. Now when it comes to the total, 3 out of USC's last 4 ball games did get over the line. Meanwhile, Cal saw overs against the likes of Oregon, Arizona, and UC Davis. I'm going to lead toward Cal plus 22, over 59.5. Next matchup, it is going to be Colorado State taking on San Jose State. 10:30 Eastern kickoff. San Jose State's the 24.5-point favorite, totals 46. And even though I absolutely hate this number, the Spartans did cover in 4 out of their last 6 ball games. Now, I'm definitely not going to be running to the window, trying to print out this ticket here. But hey, San Jose State, they got a shot at cover. All right. Once again, 4-2 against the spread in their last 6. Covers against the likes of UNLV, Wyoming, and Auburn. Now, the Spartans have also played some incredibly physical defense. They're allowing only 16 points a game, and they're in the top 15 in pass defense. Kyle Harmon and Viliami Fehoko, they've combined for over 100 tackles. They're facing a Colorado State team who's scoring fewer points a game than all other schools in Division I, except for one. These guys are averaging just 12 points a game, and they're in the bottom 5 in total yards. Now, when it comes to the number, the Rams saw all of their games this year stay under the line except for one. No real surprise there. They just can't score. Meanwhile, San Jose State's 5-2 to the under this year themselves. I'm going to lean towards San Jose State minus 24.5, under 46. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup for the video. It is going to be Hawaii taking on Fresno State, 10:30 p.m. East. Fresno State's minus 25, totals 58. Now, Fresno's on a 3-game winning streak. They've done a nice job defending the pass. David Perales is 3rd in the country with 7.5 sacks on the season. Meanwhile, Lavelle Bailey is the defensive leader in tackles. They're facing a Hawaii team who has just 2 wins on the year. They play some pretty horrible defense. As a matter of fact, these guys are in the bottom 5 in rushing yards allowed. And when it comes to the total, Hawaii saw overs against the likes of New Mexico State and Vandy. Meanwhile, Fresno State saw 3 out of their last 4 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Fresno State minus 25, over 58. Let me take one more swig of water, and then we're going to knock out this recap. Alrighty, guys, now it's time for our quick pick recap. I like Kent State minus 6, over 62. Buffalo minus 3, over 58. Northern Illinois minus 3, under 55.5. Western Michigan plus 3.5, under 46. UTEP plus 4, under 48. Appalachian State minus 2.5, over 61.5. UMass plus 15, under 40. Duke minus 9.5, under 49. Washington minus 4.5, over 60. Air Force minus 6.5, over 38. Ohio State minus 37, over 61. TCU minus 9, over 71. North Carolina minus 10, over 59. Tulane minus 7, over 58. Missouri plus 2, under 43.5. Florida plus 2.5, over 54. Minnesota minus 16, over 47. Purdue minus 5, under 42.5. Wisconsin minus 5.5, over 52. Western Kentucky minus 16.5, over 72. Virginia Tech minus 3, under 42. Temple plus 3.5, under 52. Marshall minus 3, under 46.5. Baylor plus 4, over 57.5. Southern Miss minus 2, under 50. Louisiana Tech plus 3, over 63. Georgia minus 8.5, under 65. Oregon minus 31, over 62. Illinois minus 17, over 43. Penn State minus 13, over 54. Oklahoma State minus 2.5, over 66. Syracuse plus 4, under 50.5. UCF minus 3.5, over 60 points. Stanford plus 5, under 49.5. West Virginia plus 6, under 51. New Mexico plus 16, under 44. UAB plus 1.5, over 52. Liberty plus 14 over 64.5. Navy plus 20 under 47. South Alabama minus 3 over 60 and a hook. Florida International plus 21 over 62. Troy minus 5.5 under 43 and a hook. Texas State plus 1 under 51. Alabama minus 12 under 58. Texas Longhorns minus 2 over 54.5. BYU plus 7.5 under 55. UNLV plus 7 under 49. SMU minus 2 over 67. Michigan Wolverines minus 25.5 under 45 in the tight window. Clemson minus 3 under 47.5. Arizona plus 18 over 68. Auburn plus 13 over 60. Let's try that again. Auburn plus 13 over 52. South Carolina minus 6.5 under 49. Louisville minus 8 over 54.5. Miami, Florida plus 7 under 53. Wake Forest minus 5 under 54. UCLA minus 15.5 over 63. Cal Golden Bears plus 22 over 59.5. San Jose State minus 24.5 under 46. And with my next and final free pick for the video, I like Fresno State minus 25 over 58.